Oh my goodness, you guys. This is take 13. I just need to get this out or it's never going to go out. So forgive me. But you are watching Walking with Warburg, and my name is Allison. If you are not familiar with a ketogenic metabolic therapy with a press pulse protocol, you're not going to get a whole lot out of this video. I would hit pause, go search yourself some Thomas Seyfried, and you can listen to hundreds of very entertaining, very powerful interviews. Thomas Seyfried is amazing. Okay, so here we go. I did my press pulse protocol in addition to the standard of care. Okay, so this was not alternative. My oncologist diagnosed me with terminal cancer, and he said, here's your choices for treatment. It's chemo, it's hormone therapy. Which do you want? I chose the hormone therapy. I can go into those details later in another video if you want. But anyway, I did the hormone therapy. I stayed on the hormone therapy. I started February 2023. It was August 2023 when one of my scans showed that my lymph nodes had blown up. In my mind, I was like, oh my God, it's not working anymore. And at that point, I didn't want to wait until I was unhealthy in order to try and get healthy, if that made sense. So I had been humming and hawing over whether I was going to do a ketogenic diet for like months and months. And man, if you talk to pretty much any medical practitioner about diet and nutrition, they're going to tell you, like, definitely go this way, like 100% go that way. Definite maybes from everyone. And so it was really hard to make a decision. Was I going to do keto? I mean, I've got overwhelming evidence saying that this can reduce your blood glucose levels, and cancer loves glucose. And then I also had all these different people being like, oh no, that could really make things worse for cancer. Like, definitely go this way. So in August, when I got this scan and my lymph nodes had blown up, I thought, oh my God, it's not working anymore. Allison, don't wait to get really sick in order to get healthy. Just try and get as healthy as you can starting now. And so I decided I'm going to start the ketogenic diet, and I was going to line up all my treatments so that I was also able to do a kind of press pulse approach. So September 24th, I had been in a state of ketosis for quite a while. I was aiming for 4.1 millimole glucose, which in hindsight isn't really as low as I should have been shooting for, but it worked. Okay. I was shooting for 4.1. The only way I could get there actually was by fasting. And again, I wouldn't do that again. Like, I would not fast, but that's what I did. The reason I wouldn't fast, whatever, I'm not going to go into that. I think I've talked about that already in another video. But in this protocol, it was protocol 1. A protocol for me is like, think of it like a cycle, right? So you've got a treatment cycle, you do it, it's defined, and then you do it again, and then you do it again. So those are various cycles, or for me, various protocols. I've done 7 protocols. My very first protocol, day 1, started September 24th, 2023. And I had been putting pressure on the cancer cells because I had been keeping my glucose really low. Cancer loves glucose. So if you have a low glucose, it has less opportunity to thrive. So, small edit. Okay, I actually should have explained in here a little bit more about glutamine and glucose and what all that really means. I don't know. I assume everybody knows this, but really I did a lot of homework to figure this out. The macronutrients we eat, and if you go look at, like, oh my God, what is this? I can't even see myself. If you go look at like any food label or whatever, right? You're going to see that for the most part, the bolded items are the macronutrients. So it's fat, carbohydrates, protein. Honestly, I have no idea why they made sodium or cholesterol bold. It's not a macro. It's not a fucking category. But you've got your macronutrients. That is protein, carbohydrates, and fat. The primary metabolites of those macronutrients are protein is amino acids. The
primary amino acid is glutamine. That is the key amino acid. Carbohydrates, metabolites are glucose, and fat is metabolized into fatty acids. So you've got your macros, which is protein, carbohydrate, fat. Your metabolites are the glutamine, glucose, and fatty acids. Fatty acids are used to turn into ketones. It's the ketones that become a source of fuel for healthy cells. Cancer cells cannot ferment fatty acids. So that's why we say that the two fuel sources are protein, carbohydrates, which I usually refer to as glutamine and glucose. Okay, so the macros are protein and carbohydrates. The metabolites that I tend to refer to are glutamine and glucose. Okay, I hope that helps.
The only other fermentable fuel for cancer, as explained by Thomas Seyfried, is glutamine. Unfortunately, there's nothing you can do to reduce your glutamine through dietary measures. Now, Seyfried does say that there's a couple studies where if you water fast for like 14 days plus, then yes, you can reduce your glutamine, but that's obviously not sustainable. Like, you want to do that once or twice, great. And glutamine is also one of those things you actually need it. Like, you really need glutamine. Like, if you're not metabolizing glutamine, your healthy cells are going to be sick. So it's not something you can do as a press. That is a pulse. That is something you do intermittently, whereas your body doesn't actually need dietary glucose. Your body, through gluconeogenesis, can make glucose when it needs glucose, which is why it's really hard to get your glucose as low as Seyfried has kind of said. Like, it's really hard to get it as low as Seyfried suggests you should try, right? So I think the suggestion is 3.2 to 3.6 millimoles. That is crazy hard. And it's because your body will turn proteins and fats into glucose. You don't have to actually eat it. Protein, aka glutamine, you actually need that. Anyway, cancer loves glucose and it loves glutamine. You can put pressure on the cancer cells by restricting the glucose availability. And then the only way to restrict glutamine is through pharmaceutical agents. And you have to do it intermittently. Otherwise, you will get sick. So the protocol I started with was based on somebody else's protocol, and that had been published by Hippocrates Research Foundation. And so the idea was to do a glutamine inhibitor and a hyperbaric oxygen treatment every 4 days for 21 days, and then take 2 weeks off. And this is pretty common with a lot of different therapies. And like, at the time, I was on a hormone therapy and a drug called Kisqali, which is for hormone positive breast cancers. And the cycle for Kisqali was 21 days on, 7 days off. So right now I'm on an oral chemotherapy called capecitabine, and that one's got a few different, but that's like 14 days on, 7 days off. So the press pulse is similar. So the press is that constant metabolic pressure on cancer cells where you're restricting the available glucose levels. The pulse is when you're intermittently taking away glutamine and you're going inside a hyperbaric chamber. And so that is essentially every 4 days you're doing the glutamine inhibition inside a chamber. You take 3 days break, you do it again, you're doing that for 21 days, and then you're taking 2 weeks off. So that was protocol 1 for me. The glutamine inhibitor is weight dependent, and there's very few studies on oral dosage, only that it's really clear that people have the side effects are gastrointestinal. So diarrhea, nausea, vomiting. That is pretty much the only side effects. And so, but you want to take the maximum tolerable dose. But of course, everyone's different, right? Finding out what that maximum tolerable dose is a little bit of trial and error. I started at 0.5 milligrams per kilogram, and I systematically worked my way up. And it was pretty funny because I didn't really know what to expect. And then of course everyone's different, right? So, but I do take notes. In fact, I record this stuff like I record every little detail. There's some things I don't record that I wish I did. Like, but it's like, oh my God, it's already hard enough recording every little thing you eat, every little therapy you do and medication you take and the time and the dose and your weight. And it's already hard enough that if I also added like, oh, I went for a walk at this time to this time. Anyway, but I record everything. And if I go back to protocol one, it's so cute. I also kind of like wrote down all my side effects and things like that. So um, it's good. My very first dose was 0.5 milligrams per kilogram. You see my eyes, I'm kind of reading. I had no side effects. I didn't really know what I was expecting other than, okay, like, am I going to get sick or not, right? I knew gastrointestinal. That's what I was kind of thinking. My next dose, I went up to 1 milligram per kilogram. And my notes are here. I said I felt nothing until about 8:30. Now that's PM, and I got into the hyperbaric chamber at 11 a.m. And at 8:30, it says I felt like my upper GI was sensitive. I was like maybe a bit burnt. I said it was a funny feeling. It moved to my tummy, and it just felt a bit burnt. And then I said maybe 2 out of 10 on a woozy scale. So like I don't know what your woozy scale is, but obviously I wasn't too bothered by this, and fair enough. I went though, so even though I went from 0.5 to 1, because I had like, I'm not really sure, I decided to go even slower and I went 1.1 milligram per kilogram. And I said here, and again, I got into the chamber at 10:30 a.m. And I wrote down here for my comments that I had nausea around the 60-minute mark post glutamine inhibitor. And I said, this happened while in the chamber, and I wasn't sure if it was too much oxygen or the glutamine inhibitor. So I took a bit of a break from the oxygen and then I felt fine. And then I said here, but in hindsight, it was probably the glutamine inhibitor. So what I meant there by taking like a bit of a break from the oxygen is the hyperbaric tank I have access to is pressurized with ambient air, not with oxygen. It's pressurized with just regular ambient air. And then I have a mask that goes on where oxygen comes in, it's piped in from one side and then exhausted out the other. And the recommendation is that you take air breaks every now and then. So really what that means is I take the mask off and I just breathe in regular ambient air for just a couple minutes and then put the mask back on and away I go. And sometimes that's totally appropriate to do if you're feeling just, I don't know, not quite right. But anyway, so I had considered, well, maybe this is just feeling a bit nauseous from too much oxygen, or maybe it's the glutamine inhibitor. Anyway, that was at 1.1 milligrams per kilogram. And at the time, I was also doing hyperbaric, like not just with the glutamine inhibitor. In fact, I was going every second day, but I was only doing a glutamine inhibitor every 4 days. So again, trying to align everything that I'm being treated for and align it in such a way for it to kind of work with Thomas Seyfried's metabolic therapy with the other kind of prescribed treatments, right? So I was actually doing hyperbaric more often than perhaps I needed to, but that's okay. Yeah, protocol one was interesting in that 20% apparently of people who do hyperbaric oxygen can have like their eyes change. Like you all of a sudden get blurry vision. I can't remember what it's called, but apparently it's like 20% of the time, which is actually pretty high when you think about it. Like 2 out of 10 people are like, I can't see anymore. It's temporary. Like it only lasts for a little while. Typically when you stop doing hyperbaric, your vision comes back. But I was one of those 20%. It got to the point where I was like walking down the aisles at the grocery store. I couldn't see what the aisle was for. Like, where is the gravy? Can't see it. It was horrible. I couldn't even watch TV. I started wearing my daughter's glasses just so I could like see across the room. Anyway, that eventually went away, but that was kind of surprising and totally unrelated to cancer in every way, shape, or form. Just an interesting thing that happened in protocol 1. And what else? So 1.1, and then I decided I would go to 1.3. And then my notes here, so I went into the tank at 10:30. I did 1.3 milligrams per kilogram of my glutamine inhibitor. And it says I started gagging up foam at the 2-hour mark. It lasted about 5 minutes. And then 45 minutes later, I had another bout of nausea that lasted about 10 minutes. The rest of the day, I just felt a bit weak. I hate nausea, so I put it at a 7 out of 10 on the woozy scale. My next dose, I actually went down because I didn't think that I needed to be gagging up foam. It was literally like I had poisoned myself, like in the movies where you're like, and like white foam is dribbling out of either side. I was like, I didn't need that, right? Too much. So I went down to 1.2, and I did that at 10:30 a.m. is when I got in the tank. So I had taken my glutamine inhibitor at 10. And then my notes here are that I started throwing up at 11:33, only for 5 minutes. And then again at 11:57 for 5 minutes. And then again at 12:34 for a couple minutes. And I was obviously in a good mood here because I said like every 30 minutes, LOL. So I was sick again right at 1 for a couple of minutes. And it says I felt ill all afternoon and evening. And then I had a headache for 2 days. So 1.3, I was throwing up white foam. 2 was lower, but I actually feel like I had more side effects from that than 1.3. So then I went down to 1.1, and that was fine. I just had like mild nausea, which is exactly where I wanted to be. So 1.1 milligrams was the maximum tolerable dose, which was what is appropriate for me. That is different for everyone, right? But that is what worked for me. So that took us to October 14th. So my first dose was September 24th. It's now October 14th. And I take 2 weeks off to just recoup. That entire time, I am just following a ketogenic diet and trying to keep my glucose as low as I can. That was definitely frustrating. So after my 2 weeks off, I start my next protocol, protocol 2, and it's October 29th at this point. And I had my last dose with 1.1, and I was happy with that. But I just wanted to go down by 0.1 because I had 2 weeks off. And so who knew or whatever. So anyway, I went to 1, and I said here that around the 1.5 hour mark, I felt slightly nauseous. And I said, so, that confirms that 1 was an apt dosage. But I was really struggling with my glucose in October. Like I just could not get it down. And I think I've talked about this in my other videos about how glucose is definitely the hardest thing to manage. And so I actually just skipped a whole lot. Like there's supposed to be 6 hyperbaric or glutamine inhibitor kind of pulses, I should say. There's 6 pulses in each like protocol. But in my protocol 2, I skipped a bunch just because my glucose wasn't ideal. And it seemed like a waste to pursue the pulse if the wasn't there. So I skipped dose 2. Dose 3, I also skipped. 4, 5, I skipped. My notes were just that my glucose is out of control. I got a bone scan on November 8th, which would have been the first scan to measure my cancer since starting the metabolic protocol. And then on November 12th, I got a CT scan, and I also did hyperbaric and glutamine inhibitor that day. Protocol number 2, I only did 4 doses. So first dose was 1 milligram. Second dose was on November 12th. I did 1.1 milligrams. I didn't write down anything for side effects. I did 1.1 again nothing. 1.1 again, did nothing. Then, of course, took my 2 weeks off. That brought me to the beginning of December. Now, in that 2 weeks off, I got my CT and bone scan results, and I was crazy excited to get my results because for me, this was like, okay, like what's changed? My previous set of results from August showed that my lymph nodes had blown up. And I was like, okay, Allison, like your standard of care might not be working anymore. And don't wait until you're really unhealthy to try and get healthy. Much easier to get healthy when you're not crippled by disease, right? So, anyway, it's now time, like 3 months later, is when the cancer clinic gives me my scans. So, I just get my new scans, and I'm really excited to see the results because, in my mind, this is going to be possibly results that show me whether there's any efficacy in doing a ketogenic diet and doing a press pulse. So the thing is, though, when I got those results, that's when I realized that they're not actually measuring my breast tumor. Like, even though I had been getting my results every 3 months and it was, stable, I realized that I wasn't getting objective numbers. Like, I wasn't getting, oh, your breast tumor is 11 centimeters. And now I'm looking and your tumor is 10 centimeters or 5 centimeters. What I realized I was getting at that point were subjective results. So they were words like improved, stable, progression, regression. They seem to be just what that particular radiologist sees and how he or she wanted to define what they saw on the screen, but they weren't actually measuring anything. Now, why that went over my head until that point, I don't know. But I was so excited to get those results in November that when my gave me the results, it was good news. Like he was like, oh, your lymph nodes like completely back to normal. You know, everything's fine. This is all great. Good news. But I wasn't like, yay. Instead, I was like, okay, well, what about my tumor? Like, what about the breast tumor? How's that going? Because in my mind, whether that grew or shrank was going to determine whether the ketogenic diet and or the press pulse approach was actually doing anything, right? So I was waiting for a number. But instead, he was like, oh, they don't mention it. I'm like, what do you mean they don't mention it? Like, I got breast cancer. Why are they not mentioning the breast cancer? And he's like, oh, they don't mention it. Like they don't mention it on your report. They don't mention your breast tumor. They just say that, you know, your lymph nodes are back to normal size. And then my bone scan showed that I had, less disease in the bones. And it was like, okay, well, that's good. But what about the breast tumor? So I realized at that point that, and of course, this makes perfect sense, but they don't need to measure this stuff. When you're stage 4, you're going to die. They don't really care whether your breast tumor is like 11 and a half centimeters or 11 centimeters. Like if it's growing slowly or not growing, that is success as far as they're concerned. And like nothing's going to change. They just keep you on the same treatment. That's great news. They don't care. And I don't blame them, right? They don't need to care. They don't need to measure it. They could literally spitball that sucker and know whether they're going to change your treatment or not. That is all they're looking for. They do not need granular, detailed information to decide whether they're going to keep you on a treatment or not. It was me who wanted that granular, detailed information because I wanted to know if what I was doing made any difference or not. And so at that point, I realized, okay, a bone scan and a CT scan are not going to cut it. I need a PET scan. But a PET scan is not the standard of care for breast cancer at the BC Cancer Agency. So my oncologist referred me to a private PET scan. And I mean, I'm really happy to at least have that opportunity, but it cost me a chunk of money to get, a diagnostic that had any value. So, yeah, anyway, it's like a love hate thing, right? I'm really glad I was able to get what I needed, but a bit resentful that in order to get a quality diagnostic image, I had to pay. Anyway, I paid, I got it. I got it on December 13th, but back to protocol number 3. I skipped dose number 1 for protocol 3. And protocol 2, I did 1.1. 1.1 was, that's my dose. For me, that was my um, tolerable dose where I felt like it was working because I was having mild side effects, but not so many side effects that I was getting sick, right? So 1.1, December 7th, did 1.1 again. December 11th, 1.1 again. And then the 15th, I said I was too tired to travel because I'm traveling quite far for hyperbaric. Okay, yeah, so protocol 3, I just stuck to 1.1. In fact, that was, for me, the maximum tolerable dose. That's what I was comfortable with. That's what I stuck to. I had gotten the CT bone scan results back from the cancer agency, and they were very unclear, or they seemed like they were subjective results, which, great. It showed amazing results, but I wanted numbers. Like, I wanted something measurable. I did not want somebody's opinion of which direction my cancer was going. So I got a PET scan. I got those results, and I was not expecting this. But when the doctor told me my results, I didn't have a breast tumor anymore. It was gone. It was like completely gone. So I don't actually know when it went away because, of course, the scans before that, oh my God, something in my eyes driving me nuts. Okay, so when I got my PET scan results from my doctor, I was not expecting it at all. All I was looking forward to were numbers. I wanted to know exactly how big all the tumors were so that I could finally have a baseline so that moving forward with the rest of these treatments, I would be able to understand if it is working or not. I did not want a radiologist's opinion in subjective terms of whether they thought my cancer was improving or not. I don't need someone spitballing this. I get it that for their needs, spitballing it is good enough. But for me, it wasn't. So when I got these PET scan results, I just wanted the numbers. I didn't care what they were. Give me the data, doc. Anyway, turns out my tumor was gone. My breast tumor was gone. There was no metabolic activity in my right breast, which, I mean, it's hard to explain what went through my head because I think I was just confused because I had breast cancer, right? Last time anyone had given me like a value in terms of the size was in January when I had a breast MRI and it was an 11 centimeter tumor. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not like an 11 centimeter ball. My cancer was like a strip, like a thin band that kind of wrapped around. I don't know how deep or thick it was, but anyway, they decided it was 11 centimeters. So all of a sudden to find out that I don't have a tumor, like it's gone, the only cancer I had left was in my bones, was just absolutely like totally shocking. I just could not wrap my head around it. It was amazing. And really, when I started this, I was like, I'm going to do this, you know, for like 3 months and I'm going to see if there's any benefit, right? Like I'm not going to do this for no reason. I need to get healthier. I want to see if there's a change to my cancer. And all of a sudden, I've lost weight. I have more energy. I'm happy. And now my breast tumor's gone. So, like, absolutely, I was going to continue this, right? So, I did finish protocol number 3, and it actually, oh, where am I here? Oh, I moved to protocol 4. I finished protocol 3. The last dose was December 23rd, and then the plan was to take 2 weeks off, and there was no stopping me. I was going to keep going. I had 2 weeks off, and come January was going to be protocol number 4. So I am going to leave you there because I feel like I've already been recording for like forever. And don't forget, this is like take 13. So please like and subscribe. Send this to all your friends because this really is a like mind blowing journey. I did this for real.